What actually happens to the human brain when it gets a taste of absolute power? You know, the renowned author Dr. Alaa Al Aswany tackled this very question in a recent lecture. And his answer is, well, it's both fascinating and pretty terrifying. So today, we're going to break down his analysis of how an addiction to power can lead to oppression, collapse, and we'll do it using his blend of really powerful stories and some pretty surprising science. It all boils down to this one question. This is the key to Dr. Alaa Al Aswany's entire analysis. Is the problem just about one person at the top? Or is it something much, much deeper, something baked into the system itself? To even try and answer that, Dr. Al Aswany says we first have to understand the real human price people pay for just expressing an opinion.
Okay, so let's start there, with the human cost. Dr. Al Aswany doesn't just talk in theories. He grounds his whole argument in the real-world consequences for real people who dare to challenge the official story.
So first up, let's talk about Abdel Khaleq Farouk. This guy is one of the most important economists in the Arab world. He's published over 20 books. I mean, he is a true expert in his field. So what did he do? He wrote a book called Is Egypt Really a Core Country? And in it, he basically used economic data to show that the president's claim that Egypt is very, very poor just wasn't true. His analysis said the problem wasn't a lack of resources, but, you guessed it, systemic failure.
And the response? According to Dr. Al Aswany, it was immediate and it was harsh. Farouk was arrested, accused of spreading false news, and then sentenced to 5 years in prison in a trial where apparently his lawyers weren't even allowed to speak. His crime? Publishing a book based on his professional expertise.
Next, there's a story of Mohammed Oxygen, a young, brilliant independent journalist. He wasn't with some big media company. He just built a massive following on his own because he was out there on the streets reporting with honesty. After getting arrested again and again for his critical reporting, Dr. Al Aswany explains that the psychological toll just became too much. It's truly heartbreaking. He fell into such a deep state of despair that he reportedly tried to take his own life while in custody. It's a harrowing look at the personal devastation this can cause. And look, these are not just a couple of isolated stories. While there aren't official numbers, Dr. Al Aswany points to estimates from human rights organizations. They put the number of political detainees in Egypt somewhere between 60 and 100,000 people. Just let that number sink in. Now, it's really easy to hear these stories and think, okay, well, that's what happens to people who are politically active. But Dr. Al Aswany argues that this is a huge, dangerous misunderstanding. He explains that the system's decay doesn't just affect activists. It hits the compliant citizen too. The person who's just trying to keep their head down and get by. The person who stays silent doesn't get a pass. They're still facing skyrocketing prices, a public health system that's in crisis, an education system that has basically collapsed, and a massive brain drain as the country's best and brightest, doctors, engineers, flee for a better life. The system's failures, he argues, absolutely touch everyone. So, why? Why does this keep happening? Why does power seem to corrupt so completely? This is where Dr. Al Aswany's analysis gets really fascinating. He points to a scientific study from a London university that suggests the answer might actually be biological. It's about how power literally changes your brain chemistry. And it all comes down to this one little chemical called dopamine. You've heard of it. It's the neurotransmitter that makes you feel good. It's your brain's reward system. And it turns out having absolute power gives you a massive, massive hit of it. Okay, get ready for this because this is wild. Dr. Al Aswany points to a study that concluded that the effect of absolute power on the human brain is pretty much identical to the effect of cocaine. I'm not kidding. Look at this. Both create inflated self-confidence, a sense of euphoria, paranoia, and here it is, the most important part. Both are highly addictive. So he argues a dictator isn't just a bad person, they are an addict, and they're driven to do anything to keep getting their fix of power. And this idea, that power is literally an addiction, brings us to the absolute core of Dr. Al Aswany's argument. It helps us understand the fundamental, unbridgeable gap between two very different kinds of leaders, the one who's elected and the one who takes power by force. And here's the crucial difference he makes. It's not about personality. It's about the system. An elected leader is, at the end of the day, a public servant. They're accountable to citizens who can vote them out. But a dictator? They're accountable to no one. They see people as subjects to be ruled, the Constitution as just an annoying obstacle, and their only real goal is to keep feeding that power addiction, no matter what it costs the country.
Which leads us to the final and honestly the most important takeaway from Dr. Al Aswany's analysis. If the behavior is a product of the system, well then just changing the person at the top doesn't solve the real problem, does it?
This quote right here really nails it. Dr. Al Aswany's point is that we can't just cross our fingers and hope for a good dictator. His analysis suggests the very structure of dictatorship itself, the fact that it's unaccountable, is what inevitably creates the destructive behavior that leads to one crisis after another. And he says, just look at the history. If you trace back every major catastrophe in modern Egyptian history, from the crushing military defeat in 1967, which he says was caused by a power struggle, all the way to today's economic disaster, he argues you'll find dictatorship at the root of it all. And that brings us right back to where we started. What if the president left? Dr. Al Aswany's analysis pretty strongly suggests that if you don't change the system that created him, another ruler would just take his place, get hooked on the same addiction to power, and the whole cycle would start all over again. Which leaves us with a really provocative final question. If the system itself is the problem, what does a real solution even look like?